Today I'm going to talk about based commitments and what does this have to do with sequencing, what base commitments can do for sequencing, and then I'll show a platform for base commitments. Before I begin, one distinction I want to draw is, in the past I've talked about this concept of proposer commitments. I'm now framing things built on top of a credibly neutral platform as base commitments, and other types of commitments provided by validators more of a proposer commitment. And there's some key distinctions here I'll get into later on. But before we talk about what a base commitment is and what it can provide, it's important to understand today's PBS pipeline, which you're all familiar with, but I'll highlight just a few things. In Ethereum, these are validators. They have a block. And supposedly they have a monopoly of their block. But because of the way the market structure has evolved with MEV-Boost, what ends up happening is when validators run MEV-Boost, they essentially allow for another party, a block builder, to construct their block. And so they have a monopoly, but it's like they give over the rights of how the monopoly is built and a lot of the other components around it. And so builders today, when they see a block, they've got the power. They're like Ace Ventura going down the road. They're doing whatever they want with the block, not just censoring for OFAC, but they may do things like don't maximize the blob space because they're playing latency games. They may do a bunch of other things that I won't get into, but the proposer themselves may have the monopoly and they want the blob space to be filled, but today they can't specify that, and they hand these rights over to the builder to do as they see fit. And so validators tomorrow, and what base commitments enable, is it returns the power back to the proposer. And so a builder may still construct the block, but when they're given this block, they're given a template that must be filled by the builder. And so they say, hey, fill my block, builder, but these are the conditions and constraints that you must follow. And so I gave some examples here. IL stands for inclusion list. So a proposer can say, builder, here's an inclusion list. Make sure these transactions get included. And that could be for censoring, could be for other reasons. PBS, that's the biggest commitment we see today. Pre-comps, what others have been talking about, I'm sure, all day. And these are conditions and constraints that the validator tells the builder downstream, hey, these must be abided by, these are already sold, whole host of things. And so I see validators tomorrow as the Judge Judy, maybe not translate to all cultures, but they're the enforcer. They are the real monopoly as we go forward. And a lot of this thinking actually aligns with Vitalik for a long time. He's kind of said, and Ellie's here, but in Zuberland, there's this nice debate about what do we do with the testers? Like, what happens if we centralize them? And Vitalik made it very, very clear, like, the buck stocks with proposers. And it seems to be where a large majority of the community is evolving towards is maybe it's okay if we have one relay. Maybe it's okay if we have one block builder, but do not centralize the validator set. And that's a key thing in the roadmap as we go forward, a key part of Beam Chain, if that's the path we go down. But just a quick picture of the builders. They look like Mr. Clean. And again, this is getting at Vitalik's, some of his quotes where he talks about what if we give the builder a block, but 80% of the block is already constructed, and builders become polishers. And they have much less say about how the block comes together, but just shove some high-valued MEV transactions in around what they've already been given. And this raises the question, one of my favorite oracles in life, Yoda, proposers wield the power you say, trust them we must. And so what does this have to do with sequencing? One of the things when I started to look at base commitments that I asked myself was, is there a way to use Ethereum's decentralized validator set in a different way than we have historically thought about? And when I started to jump down this rabbit hole, I not only thought about things around block construction, but there's other services that 1 million computers that have liveliness guarantee or liveliness based on history of over 99.9%. Are there other services they can provide or other commitments? And Vitalik actually, in his recent post on the Scourge, talked about a couple. And he alludes to things like LLMs, chat apps that need decentralization, these whole host of ideas. But I think even just within the confinements, not leaping to that of block construction, there are a lot of services proposers can provide sequencers or rollups that enable a better user experience for the L1 or when using the L1. And so I'm going to go through a couple of these examples. They do address some of the challenges quote users have today, but the first one, people have mentioned this, when you're a base rollup, you have the unfortunate situation where 12 seconds is the fastest you can get finality. So we issue these things called pre-comps. It improves user experience and UX, but shared sequencing. So things like Espresso, instead of just having a validator set within their consensus mechanism, one day maybe they can use or tap into Ethereum's validator set. They can also become sequencers within shared sequencing networks. So it's another revenue stream for validators to opt into. They're great at running infrastructure. They're up all the time. It's a great experience. Even today, though, there's a lot around blobs. And so one of the things, let's say if Ethereum Align's validator wants to support base sequencing, one of the challenges of base sequencing is going to be that likely the chains aren't going to be big at first. They may not even fill a whole blob. How are they going to get these things in there? And so what a validator could offer is blob merging. So they could take a bunch of small rollups, combine the blobs together, and post them on chain. The validator likely can take a fee for that. The rollup benefits because then they'll get included and they're sharing the cost amongst the others in the blob. So it's one service that a validator could provide. Inclusion lists. So again, this gets to censorship, but just around blobs themselves. One of the things we've heard a lot of debate about, and particularly in the solo staker community, is Ethereum is looking to increase the amount of blobs per block, which if you don't have high bandwidth, causes you to miss a slot. And so one of the areas that I expect to see built on a base commitment platform in the future is going to be Ethereum can max out blobs. So let's say Ethereum can move to 12 blobs, 6 blobs, whatever the number is. Solo stakers or home stakers or people who don't have the bandwidth can actually specify in my block there can only be 2 blobs. And so you allow for customization by the validator, and then the network can scale. 2 blobs, 16 blobs, they're not missing out on much revenue, so less centralization risk, but it's a great example of a way to do this. The other is, and I talked about this, the blobs must be filled. Builders play games today, not allow them to play games tomorrow. The other one is composability, and actually there were some people here today that are working on infrastructure, but cross rollups or even cross sequencers, there are advantages to getting things like state lock from the L1, and this goes beyond just pre-comps. More than happy to talk about these ideas later, but have thought a lot about this as a service validators could provide users of Ethereum. Last is gas sponsoring. This is very similar to AA, but instead of having to move to AA style accounts, you can actually use EOIs and use a validator as a gas sponsor. So someone sophisticated could sell fixed gas to a wallet and provides a better experience. Okay, so now that we have a framework for how to think about the validator's role in the future, then we have some ideas that based commitments could provide to sequencers and how it ties in. How do we do this in the right way? Can we put this all in protocol? Probably not. So it's going to be out of protocol. And in Vitalik's talk, he mentioned commit boost, which I'll get into. But more importantly, he talked about if we're going to have out of protocol solutions, we should do this stuff. That's what he said, this stuff in the right way. And so I want to talk a little bit about what the right way means from my perspective. And how do we get to base commitments? Another meme, but yeah, commit boost. So commit boost is a sidecar that validators run that allows them to communicate conditions and constraints to the base commitments. If you think about today, validators run this sidecar called MevBoost. MevBoost, people think as one thing, it's actually 2. It's a software validator runs, and it's a protocol of how relays and builders communicate. And so commit boost is just the software. And if you abstract that away from the protocol, what you end up with is a standard of how these protocols communicate to the validator. And if you just standardize that, similar to the app store we see on your phones, if you standardize how app developer speaks to the end consumer, you can allow for anyone to build there, and you start to see all this innovation. So the idea is commit boost is a unified sort of app store that validators run, and they can opt into any commitments. And some of the importance of and getting back into Vitalik is if we're going to have to rely on out-of-protocol solutions, what's the best way to construct those? And I do think, it's if you look at Ethereum, they've painted a roadmap of how you become credibly neutral. Not everyone's biased. I have my own biases, but you can do these things to construct in certain ways that allow things to be what I'll call based. And so one of the most important things as we thought about Commit Boost is that it is a sidecar for all stakers, sophisticated and unsophisticated. It allows solo stakers and the Ethereum network to continue to be decentralized. It's open for all to help build. And so it's really important, as Matthew alluded to, just the openness of this. So open source, Commit Boost is fully MIT plus Apache licensed. And most importantly, it's open for all to build on. So we can't limit. There are other approaches out there where they could limit who's building on top, but it's really important that we allow the validators to kind of let the app creators duke it out, and they choose, and the best wins, I guess. The other thing we thought a lot about is can you improve stakers' lives? And so a lot of the complexity around Commit Boost that is introduced. There is more code than just Mev Boost, but what we've done is taken the safety features that a lot of validators build themselves and put it into the software, which gives unsophisticated actors access to tooling they would have never had, and even improves the OPSEC for sophisticated actors. It gets built by community across all Ethereum, so I'll get into this, but this is not a venture-backed effort. There's no token, no monetization, and so it relies on the community, which is important not only for security reasons, but to ensure that it remains open and anyone can build on top of it. It's built for all validators to make their own choices. There is a potential path we go down where we don't use a base sidecar, and they can begin to force or enforce certain things on the validator themselves. And that goes all the way from RPCs, transaction flows, restaking platforms, collateral, certain hardware that we go down. And the interesting thing about Commit Boost is you could even say things like, builder, you must use Espresso, or you must use Suave to construct your block. And so it just opens a whole design space for the validator to choose. And last, it's a unified standard all can build on. With that, saved everyone 10 minutes unless there's questions, but thank you for staying. And
yeah, question? I was just thinking about one of the points you made about blob commitments and like post EIP 4844, there was a bit more momentum thinking about more efficient use of blob space. So, for example, I think Dapline is his name. He made like a basic scaffolding for a blob sharing protocol. When you were talking about blob commitments here, do you think that someone could spin up a module to make more efficient use of blob space in that way?
yeah, absolutely. And I think it generates revenue or additional APY. So it solves an issue for the network and generates additional APY. And why I think that is because basically a lot of these people that need these services aren't sophisticated or large enough, but they need to get included. So they're probably, alongside others, willing to pay a little more just to make sure they're included. And when you combine that together, then the validator has provided a service plus additional revenue.
Okay, thanks. I'd also had, so this is another question unrelated to that. So when I'm thinking of all these modules that can basically be orchestrated through the sidecar that Commit Boost offers, let's say you have like an MEV boost one, and then you have another one. Like one of my main questions, maybe it's a bit more obvious, but like, can you possibly have like two modules that are complementary to each other and running together, or will the validator have to opt to using one specific module?
No, they'll be able to choose multiple modules. And one of the questions we get a lot is, what about conflicting modules? So these things that are interacting together. And what I expect to develop is companies like Beacon Chain or Rated, and they're already working on this, to be assessing how modules are created and open up a dashboard or a tool set for validators to use to ensure when they're opting into these things, they have a good assessment of, hey, this conflicts with another one or it doesn't. And I think people just default to the validators are just going to ape into these things. I think they will initially, but when slashing conditions happen, they won't. I think we'll see this in AVSs as well. People will stop just opting into every AVS. They're going to be a little more selective about how they do that. But yeah, in the end state, validators can run 100 different services if they want to. And we also already see sophisticated validators starting to multiplex on their side. So part of the advantage of Commit Boost is it takes a lot of the internal tools validators have created with time and it open sources it. And so there are a couple who create their own multiplexers on their side. And what they're going to end up doing is running like 5 pre-conf protocols. And when it's their time to stack a block, they'll be optimizing the revenue across all those. So that may be like, you know, million gas here, 2 million gas there, you know, top a block auction here, PBS for the rest of it, a whole host of these things.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Eddie.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so the most popular commit boost modules today are, I would say, are the pre-conf module and the MEV boost module. Are there any modules that have been implemented like already that are not those two?
There is a thing called IL Boost, which is inclusion list, which was developed by someone at Sigma Prime. Don't know if they want their name out there, but and then Julian and Barnaby. It's basically the latest implementation of FOIC. I think I'm saying that right, but it got a little stalled because Sigma Prime team is currently working on the hard fork, but it has been tested by solo stakers and a few others, and I'm hoping we get a little more audit eyes on it, and early next year alongside pre-comps, a good chunk of the community will run the inclusion list. So it is an optimistic inclusion list, but it's better than nothing, and it was designed in a way where you're not giving up any MEV. So if you happen to stack a block and there's 100 ETH, you just take the MEV boost block, and unfortunately the inclusion list doesn't happen, but next slot it will if someone runs it.